They said it couldn't be done combining Intel and AMD in the same gaming PC. Well, my friends, if you've been living under a rock, you haven't heard of the Intel Arc A750 and A770 graphics cards. These have been out for a while, and I must confess that I have not tested, built with, or gamed with either. I'm not sure why. It just kind of slipped through the cracks. We got busy with other projects. So this marks the first time I have ever built with one. I'm interested to see how this works, in particular with opposite company specs. Like, you wouldn't expect to, again, build a system with an Intel graphics card and then an AMD CPU. But that's exactly what we're gonna do here. I've chosen a Ryzen 7 7700X for this build, under $300 today. Obviously, it's no X3D chip, but for the price, I think it's pretty sweet value for money. Of course, combining that with an A770, which on paper is already a fairly compelling value option in the graphics card market, I think this is gonna be a pretty sweet rig. Again, despite these two companies normally being at total odds with each other. I've chosen a Gigabyte X670E Aorus Pro motherboard for this build. A little overkill, I will admit, for just a 7700X, but this has a beautiful white face. It's gonna look nice in our Thermaltake case. Speaking of, this is a View 270 Plus. Now this has tempered glass on two sides, which I think looks really nice. It also has a kind of like baby bluish facade, and I am kind of digging it, to be honest. It reminds me of like the Frozen movies. My daughter's super big into Frozen, and so I showed her this case. Like, look, you could totally build like a Frozen themed PC with this chassis. Of course, it doesn't really hurt that we're using an Intel graphics card that's gonna be white as well, and Intel is usually blue, so it kind of fits. I'm trying here, okay? I've chosen some sweet Corsair DDR5 for this build, and a 1TB Western Digital blue NVMe. For cooling, I've chosen a Thermalright Frozen 360mm AIO. On paper, again, gonna be a little overkill for the CPU we've chosen. You definitely have some overclocking headroom if you wanted to take advantage of that. Of course, it is also going to be white, which will play nicely with the remainder of this rig. And I just realized I completely forgot to include a power supply in this build. I don't know, I bought like half of this stuff. So we had this sitting on the shelf for a while. Of course, the CPU we've had for a good while as well. But I bought this myself on Amazon, as well as the cooler and the case, because I thought, again, these would play nicely with each other, but I completely overlooked the power supply. Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Let's not waste any more time then. We'll jump straight into building right after this. I hope you'll stay with me. If you're planning your next PC build, then consider checking out our sponsor, VIP SCD Key. Their Windows 10 and 11 OEM keys sell for a fraction of retail and will unlock the full potential of your OS. They'll also remove those pesky activation watermarks. Click the links below to get started today, and be sure to use our special offer code SKGS for a sweet discount on a variety of options, including Windows 10 and 11, Pro and Home, and more. To get started, all we'll need is what's on top of this box and what's inside of it. Of course, the CPU, RAM, our storage drive, which happens to be an NVMe, nice and toolless, and this lovely white motherboard. I want to take a second here to show you what this looks like. This has been previously opened, which is why it's not an anti-static bag, but yeah, get a load of this thing. It is just gorgeous. It's playing a bit oddly with the lighting in this office because it's reflective and just very bright. Not used to that with tech, but really glad that these have kind of like resurfaced in the market. It allows for some pretty cool looking builds. We're gonna install our 7700X, and this is gonna be fairly straightforward. Just gonna gently drop it into the socket, being careful. This is an LGA socket this time around. We'll lower the retention arm, and pop goes the plastic cover. We just have two DDR5 DIMMs. Of course, we have to go with DDR5 for AM5, and 2 tends to play a bit better than 4 when it comes to Ryzen, especially the later Ryzen CPUs. There we go. You know, I thought I was gonna have to use this LTT screwdriver kit, which I'm not being paid to say anything about, but I really like this. It's coming very handy. I thought I'd have to remove this metal slab with a screwdriver, but it looks like it is totally toolless. That is nice right there. We're actually gonna be able to install this M.2 without any tooling at all, which is convenient. In goes the SSD. I'm gonna press it down, and this will also snap into place toolless, and then this little retention arm here keeps it all in place. That's really nice. I really like the whole toolless thing going on here. And of course, the other benefit of M.2s, less cabling to deal with, no SATA data cables, no discrete SATA power to worry about. That's gonna come in handy later. This is a pretty sweet looking platform, if I do say so myself. And you can see it's the actual PCB that's white, or well, sort of like a creamish color, but it's close enough to white. I won't complain in a white build. Now we can prep our case. I really like the way this looks, even though the color is a bit unorthodox. We'll need this baggie right here. Now we can gently lower this in. I'm probably gonna regret not securing some of the AIO stuff ahead of time, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I want to make sure none of these cables are snagged in the rear IO shield, and it'll sit sort of like that there. I also appreciate Thermaltake including metallic screws instead of black ones, even though I expect they're probably a bit cheaper to manufacture this way. It's the attention to detail that counts. Check out the beauty of that combo, huh? Gosh, I really miss white PC builds. We'll just take care of some basic wiring while we're here. Oh yes, and even a unified front panel connector. I am sold, Thermaltake. Also gonna lightly cable manage now to make things easier a bit later. Next, I wanna quickly test fit this 360mm AIO. I know it's compatible with the case, but with our fat Corsair DRAM, is it gonna work? Wow, it actually does. Thermaltake gave us just enough space, and actually, yeah, I mean, this is the most snug fit I think I've ever seen for a 360. That's good though. I like builds that don't have wasted space. This for sure won't have much. We'll just get it fastened for real this time. Oh, would you look at that? With this mounting bracket included with the AIO, we don't actually need to prep anything on the motherboard side to get this secured, at least for AM5. Let's not forget this important step. Been there, done that. And with thermal paste applied, we'll go ahead and get the block situated. Hopefully, this isn't too troublesome. So far, it seems decent. I'm gonna try to wrap the tubes around this way so we have less slack. Really that simple, it just hooks around the original brackets and then you just torque these two Phillips screws down. That is super convenient. Also, yes, in case you're wondering, we still retain enough room to comfortably remove our DRAM. So it's not like we've completely blocked access to that by installing this AIO. So that's convenient as well. I know this looks like an absolute disaster right now, and it will probably remain that way to some extent because there are so many different RGB LED cables mixed in with fan power cables. I think there's 6 RGB fans in total, including the ones with the AIO, and each of those fans has 2 respective cables each to deal with. I think I've got it all wired up correctly. It's just gonna look a bit jumbled for now. I'll tell you what though, from this side so far, it is looking absolutely incredible. I just realized there's one piece of plastic I have somehow missed. Ooh la la. Now it's about time to tackle the power supply. And like I said, I, for some reason, did not buy one ahead of time for this build. I have no idea why, I completely forgot it. It's a very important part of any gaming PC. The one I have on hand here is an EVGA 710BP. It's a bronze unit. It is about the comfortable-ish wattage that I would normally go after for a rig of this caliber. 700 watts should be, frankly, more than enough, but it's only 80 plus bronze. It's a bit cheaper. So if you wanted something a bit higher end, I'll have an alternative also linked in the description, something we've used previously. We'll simply slot this in fan side down back here. Thankfully, this unit is very small, so it makes maneuvering pretty simple. Get this thing around some cables and secure it from the rear. One other thing that's nice about this cheaper unit is that the cabling is at least all black, no ketchup and mustard to deal with here, but this still isn't good enough for me. I know the obvious choice for sleeve cable extensions is white, right? This is the white build, go with some white extensions. This kit's like 20 or 25 bucks on Amazon. In my opinion, that goes a long way towards an aesthetically pleasing build, but I'm not going that route. This is gonna be slightly controversial. I'm going with sort of like a silver chrome metallic cable set. Again, about 25 bucks on Amazon. This is gonna, I think, offset some of the more silverish accents on our motherboard along the side of our radiator and the thermal right lettering, and also some of the screws and things that just sort of, yeah, offset the largely white presence this rig has. Oh yeah, I think this is gonna set things off nicely. I know it's polarizing, but I'm a fan of it. And I know this run looks a bit weird coming across the back of the motherboard, but this is the best way to keep things looking clean on the left side. The last piece of our puzzle then is the Intel Arc A770. This is from a company called Sparkle, who you'll probably see quite a bit around the Intel graphics space. They're not very common. I don't know if they even make NVIDIA and AMD Radeon cards, but rest assured, they are pretty reputable in the Intel graphics space. This one is the Luna edition. So it has a white shroud. Oh my. Yeah, this thing is absolutely gorgeous. Oh, check that out. There's even silver baked into that's so good. That actually works really well with the custom cable extensions. I really didn't think that was a part of this, but I'm glad I went that route. This has, for some reason, a blue PCB. I'm not sure why, maybe it's just like an homage to Intel, but rest assured the shroud, the fans, even the cables running to the PCB are all white, which will work great with this PC. Definitely gonna remove this yellow quality control sticker though. This color has no business anywhere near our rig. And you can see this one uses 2 supplemental 8 pins, none of that 12-volt high power mess, which is nice. This is not a super powerful card again, but for the money spent, it's pretty sweet. Wow, I'm a bit disappointed that Thermaltake's included these fixed PCIe covers at the rear of their case. This just screams Yeah, it's just cheap. I can't even really remove them because parts of my motherboard are blocking access from inside the chassis. I've got to push things the other way, but you can see they don't really want to come out the other way. Yeah, this sucks. In she finally goes then. I am very excited to see how this all looks now that it's coming together. Get in there. There we go. I am super glad this card does not want to sag. Some cards are prone to that. This one doesn't appear to be. It's also shorter, so that helps. I really wish I could bridge these cables somehow, but for again, 20, 25 bucks, I think this will do. And just like that, what a cool looking rig. This color scheme, it just works for me. I don't know, the bluish, I don't know if you want to call it baby blue or frozen blue or what, but it really works well with this totally white interior and some silver accents to boot. This is better than I expected it would look on paper. It's always difficult trying to gauge this stuff when you're just part picking on sites like Amazon and Newegg, but really happy with the way this one turned out. The next thing to do, actually gonna do this in the same shot, is go ahead and fire it up. Now, we'll have to log in and we'll have to install Windows, of course, and then we will sync up the RGB. So for now, it's probably gonna be Rainbow Puke, but I am curious how it looks fired up. So all the fans are spinning, that's a good sign. We have movement in the AIO, fluids churning, that's a good sign as well. For some reason though, our LEDs are not on. That's strange. I have it plugged into the motherboard, so maybe they're just not like on by default with this board.
12 seconds later.
Here we are. It just took a few extra seconds. Literally when I stopped filming the previous scene, they kicked on, of course, perfect timing. These actually look really good just in the default rainbow state, and it's kind of an odd coincidence that Thermalright fans, at least these RGB ones that they include with their AIO, look almost identical to Thermaltake's own fans that they include in this chassis. It works really well, I'm not complaining, just something I wanted to point out. Also want to point out our AIO block has built-in RGB with sort of like an infinity mirror, and their logo looks really clean. I'm a big fan of this. There are also some RGB LEDs in the motherboard. You can see our ORS logo is illuminated, kind of synced up with the fans in this rig, and that's because we ran all of the fan RGB cables into a single addressable RGB header on the board, so just a convenience factor for me. So if we're talking first impressions, I am very impressed with this chassis, the 270 Plus TG. If you're interested, I'll have this link below, along with all the other parts that you've seen in this video. We are not quite done yet because I do want to show you how this thing fares in some games. Typically, I just show you like an average 3D Mark Time Spy score for this combination of hardware, but I am personally curious how these two, the CPU and the graphics card, because they're from opposing teams, so to speak, play together in games. So we're going to experiment a bit with that, and we're also going to sync up the LEDs in these fans in the motherboard so that it's all one cohesive sort of like color scheme. So I'm gonna try to match the baby blue of the chassis. I think that's gonna be creme de la creme. So recall again, I have never worked with an Intel graphics card before. That means I've never installed Intel graphics drivers. Happy to report, and this is probably not news to anybody, that this is as straightforward as an NVIDIA or AMD counterpart, so no issues here. Moving on then to some games, starting first with our 3D Mark Time Spy DX12 1440p synthetic. This scored 13,216, giving us a score better than 68% of all submitted results, and both our graphics and CPU scores are fairly similar to each other, which suggests that there's not a huge bottleneck one way or the other, which of course was by design. I'm also fairly impressed by how well this performed, given the fact that our CPU and our graphics card are both in the $300-ish price range. We're not spending a crazy sum of money, at least for core components, in order to get a decent score. But let's see how this translates in the real world. GTA 5 came out several years before Intel ever had discrete graphics. I was a bit worried about optimization for this title, but it actually ran very well. We were hitting the frame limiter in this game, in fact, in 1440p, high settings across the board with no anti-aliasing. Even on the road scene where things get a bit more dicey, there are more textures and things to deal with as well, the frame rate was still respectable, over 100 FPS on average, usually in the 120 to 130 ballpark with no severe frame time spikes. Moving on then to Dirt 5. Now this was an AMD touted title back when it first came out. I think it was bundled with some Radeon graphics cards. So how is Intel, their arch nemesis, going to hold up with this title? Actually quite well. So we're averaging comfortably in the 100 FPS range. In fact, even frame time spikes are very rare in this one, so an extremely smooth experience, which is very important for racing titles. If we wanted to dumb this down to say 1080p or drop the in-game settings down to about medium, I think we could comfortably hit 120 FPS on average. Now how about an NVIDIA touted title? This is Shadow of the Tomb Tomb Raider, which if you recall was touted by NVIDIA back when I believe 20 series was announced. This game in high settings in 1440p actually fared very well. Again, around 80 FPS, which I think is acceptable for this title. Again, if you wanted a higher frame rate, you could of course drop the in-game settings. I wouldn't really drop the resolution for a title like this. It looks very, very clean, especially in the outdoor settings here. We don't have ray tracing, of course, or anything like that turned on. I don't advise that for a card of this caliber anyway, but the game still looks lovely and the frame time spikes are pretty much non-existent. But now it's time to give our RG 770 a real run for its money. This is Starfield in 1440p. Again, I wanted to use this resolution because it's a nice, typically a nice balance of CPU and GPU horsepower. It's not too pixel intensive where the graphics card's always the bottleneck, and it's also not too low a resolution such that the CPU is having to work overtime because the frame rate as a result is so high. I had to lower the in-game settings to the default medium preset here, and you can see while we're on the surface of a planet, we're averaging somewhere around 40 to 50 FPS. I will say though that for a $200 to $300 card, this is fairly typical. What I was really looking for here was any sort of instability, and I'm happy to report this game actually played back very smoothly with no stuttering of any kind. All in all then, at least given the games that we tested here, I would say that I am very impressed with the Intel Arc A770. I'm a bit disappointed in myself that I didn't give it a chance earlier, although this card apparently was plagued by some software issues earlier on, of course some game optimization issues that are always going to happen when you have a new graphics card manufacturer, so to speak, enter the arena. But as of now, at least, I'm happy to report the games we tested ran very fine, and I would happily recommend this card to anybody looking for a budget graphics card. The only thing left to do then was sync up the RGB, which you can see I have managed to do here. Now, it was no simple task. I thought it would be as straightforward as installing RGB Fusion, which is Gigabyte's own baked-in, like in-house RGB software suite, would have worked with the motherboard, and of course we have all of the RGB from the fans running into the motherboard through an addressable header. That, though, did not play out the way I expected it. This software, I've got to say, it is absolute dog crap. I cannot believe that this program is being advertised on Gigabyte's website. It should not be affiliated with any product that they produce unless said product is already a dumpster fire to begin with. It's frankly a bit embarrassing. It needs to be completely overhauled, and unfortunately this is pretty much the case for most like motherboard in-house RGB software suites. They all just kind of suck. I don't think I've run into a single RGB software suite that is just good out of the box from a motherboard vendor. That said, I did use Signal RGB, and I think we've done some promotional work for them in the past. I was curious to see if that just randomly would work with this motherboard and allow us to sync up all of the other lights. And it actually did. It didn't take long at all to get it set up, and I was able to configure with a few of their baked-in color like wheel codes and things. So I was able to get the coloring just about right. It's maybe slightly different on camera than it is in person, just with the white balance and stuff, but I would say this looks a lot better than the Rainbow RGB Puke, although this might not be your cup of tea. This at least follows the same color scheme as the case from Thermaltake. And yeah, overall, just very excited about this one. I actually showed my daughter because she loves Frozen, like I said, and she wanted to see what a kind of like blue and white themed rig looked like. I think this came out very well. And it also, like you just saw, performs very well. So best of both worlds here, and it's not gonna totally break the bank. So with that, if you wanna build this exact system or something very similar, I'm gonna have all of these components linked in the video description for your viewing pleasure. I do appreciate you watching this one as well. Be sure to give it a thumbs up if you thought it was cool. Consider subscribing, clicking that red subscribe button down below. That would be super cool of you. And be sure to leave a comment in the description. Leave a comment in the comment section, not in the description. I don't think you can do that. Letting me know what you would change about this rig, if anything at all. I know this isn't gonna be everyone's cup of tea. I know people are gonna like see an Intel graphics card and get it away from me, but I thought it was pretty cool. I actually really enjoyed using this card. I mean, that's like just my raw impression. I bought it myself. I haven't done any promotional work with Intel for their new cards or anything like that. If it sucked, I would tell you. The only thing that really sucked in this build, the cabling is it's a little rough, it's a little rigid, a little too rigid for my taste, so it looks a bit messy here. I would have hoped that I could have cleaned that up a bit more, especially for the supplemental PCIe connectors. But everywhere else, I think for the money spent, it's pretty darn impressive. Maybe don't buy an X670E motherboard if you want to save some cash there. I just wanted a white motherboard for this build, and I really cared about the aesthetics of this one. But otherwise, happy hunting, happy building. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Greg. Thanks for learning with me.